Or you want to join in? Do you? Right. So in this book, you'll be happy to know. Oops, there is a puppy called what's his called? Marco. Right. You need your microphone.
Oh, that's help. Is this helpful?
Yep, that's helpful. So I felt that Scooter, despite his diminutive size, you could pretend that he's
scooting. He's demonstrating his
scooting.
namesake.
Right. Is that what you're doing, baby?
Your anal glands need expressing.
Right. So Jim has known Scooter for a long time. Right.
Anal glands are itchy. I'm not going to. You would like to know how to drain your dog's anal glands? We could do. It'll clear the room, but.
I think we should keep this a clean family show tonight. Let's not go there. So anyway, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out to the book launch for Arkangel, which is a Sigma Force thriller. It takes place in the Arctic to a great degree, but also in Russia. And there's all kinds of other cool stuff in it. Also, we go to the Vatican.
Just briefly, yeah, there's just something at the end that occurs. Don't tell them what happens at the end.
You mean it's not going to be a Yellowstone moment here?
No.
No. All right. Anyway, virtual audience, thank you very much for joining us. And I have a little bullet list of questions that I made up.
Everybody smile. It's all about social media now.
I taught Jim how to accept an invitation to collaborate on Instagram.
What the heck is that? She says my Instagram post is, please collaborate. On what? Are we working on a book together? What are we talking about?
I thought, well, it's a new trick that somebody taught me. I can't claim any particular. And the only social media I have of any kind is to do the bookstore Instagram. Otherwise, don't have any. And so I'm frequently surprised by things that people show me from other forms of social media, but that's the way it is. Anyway, I have a few questions, assuming that perhaps there is somebody who has never read a Sigma Force book who is watching this and would like to dip their toe into the series. So my first question is, and you say this in the book, what does the Greek letter sigma stand for?
It stands for the sum of all. It's a mathematical symbol for, if you're doing math, it's sigma stands for sum all. So basically, Sigma Force are special force soldiers. They're redrummed out of the service for various reasons, but because of special aptitude or skill, they're secretly recruited by DARPA, the Defense Department's research and development agency. So they're basically trained in various scientific disciplines. As I just say, they're sort of scientists with guns. So sort of the sum of brain and brawn is why it's Sigma.
And what is Sigma's motto? It comes up in the book in a crucial situation.
To be there first.
You answered 2 questions right. This is so exciting.
Well, I've only written 18 books.
Okay,
so
why?
What's the 4th word on the 17th page?
Why is the Sigma Force headquarters in the World War II bomb shelters under the Smithsonian Castle?
So there actually is old World War II era bomb shelters beneath the Smithsonian Castle off the National Mall. And at this point, I needed to hide Sigma somewhere, and they needed to be close to the halls of power, both the scientific institutions of the Smithsonian, but also, you have the White House, you have the Congress there, so they're a bit of a political organization too, and they run into a bit of politics in this book. How many people have read the last book? Okay, so I'm not going to ruin the ending of the last book. So something catastrophic happens at the end of the last book that we pick up in this book.
You don't get a Yellowstone moment either, then.
No.
All right. Well, I'm referring to the fact that I completely ruined the ending of one of Jim's books when he was here by yes. Anyway, Yellowstone's the key word for the fact that I completely screwed up.
Where is this place we're looking for? It's hidden somewhere in the United States. And Barbara, it's Yellowstone. Thank you, Barbara. Now you don't have to read the book, people.
It was not one of my finest moments, I have to agree. All right, so Sigma is covert, working under DARPA. Why are they covert instead of, an acknowledged agency?
Because they're cooler that way. No, I mean, basically, they're field agents for DARPA, so they have to go do an investigation, so it's best to do that covertly, especially since they've, again, recruited secretly out of special forces, so they have, the acumen to be able to face field challenges. So it's best to keep that under wraps.
In numerous thriller series, there are operatives in one covert operation after another. Would it be possible for them to do the things that you have them doing if they were, in fact, sort of under scrutiny?
Probably not. I mean, if you had rules and regulations you had to follow, then, Kowalski would be in jail a long time ago. So it's best that we just, let Kowalski be Kowalski and not restrict him.
So if you read a lot of thriller series, it's sort of comforting to think that all around us are various agencies, unacknowledged, but nonetheless hard at work to protect us. So I think that's really fun. So what is Gray's special talent?
So he basically sort of thinks outside the box. His ability is sort of to cobble together disparate little pieces and try to put them together into sensible order. So he basically has a unique mind, sort of a slippery mind, as he's described at one point.
I think of it as pattern recognition. He's really good
Yeah.
at pattern recognition, which is a tremendous
That's much more
asset.
succinct than I did. Thank you.
Well, I cheated because it was in the book. Okay, so who founded Sigma?
That's a good question. I mean, again, I don't know if I want to. If you've not read the early books, who founded Sigma is Sean McKnight. Something happens to Sean, so Painter takes over. So I hope I'm not ruining anything from it early on. But
And how long ago was it in Sigma time?
in Sandstorm, Sean McKnight is the head of Sigma, and then he passes the torch to Painter Crow in Map of Bones.
I read an interesting article about archaeologists working in China along the Silk Road, and they have found various remains and so forth that lead them to, if not contest, at least debate whether humankind really originated in Africa, or if they did, where did they go first? It's really been an interesting thing. So, Hyperborean, tell us what that actually means.
So what Arkangel is about is sort of about lost continents and lost myths. It starts out with the death of a Vatican archivist who discovers possibly the secret to the Golden Library of the Tsars. Basically, that's a vast storehouse of books that vanished after Ivan. Let me backtrack a little bit. So first there was Ivan the Great. He married a Byzantine princess, and as a dowry, he acquired a vast library out of Byzantia, including supposedly texts from the lost library of Alexandria. These texts are considered to be there's something like a codex where they listed some of the books, and there's such rare books that everybody's been looking for. Them. If they can be ever found, it's probably worth millions of dollars. So everybody's been hunting for that. So this Vatican archivist thinks he's found a clue to where that's hidden. He gets murdered. The story begins. So it's all tied basically to the Greek myth of how people know about Hyperborea that haven't read the book. Nobody. Good. So supposedly there's been a lost continent in the Arctic. The Greeks call it Hyperborea. Basically, it means beyond the north wind if you're fluent in Greek. And it's supposed it was populated by one of the most ancient human species, and was considered to be potentially immortal. Maps were drawn of this place. People swore Robert Peary, the great polar explorer, swore he saw Hyperborea. So the mythology has existed for up until present time. A lot of the local Inuits also swear there's a continent in the north. But of course, could there be a continent in the north? My goal in this book was, what is the seed of truth behind that myth? Could there really be a continent that we don't know about somewhere in the ice of the North Pole area? That becomes a big question. Could there be? And you're going to find out that I'm going to convince you before you're done with this book that there actually is a continent in there. But the weird thing about this, this was, I have my idea box. I explained this before. Where do you get your ideas from, Jim? We hate that question, right? Everybody knows that. I'm not gonna test you. Guess which question all authors hate to hear. Where do you get your ideas from? Don't ask us that. But I have my idea box, and I gather things. So I had this whole section about Hyperborea, and I'm going to prove it's real. And then I was reading about this Russian philosopher, Alexander Dugin. He wrote a book in 1992 called the Hyperborean Theory. And in that, he proposes that the Russian people are actually descendants of the ancient Hyperboreans. Now, that sounds pretty far-fetched, but Alexander Dugin has the ear of Putin. He is taught in the military academies. He's also sometimes called as Rasputin's brain, or Putin's brain, or Putin's Rasputin. That's how influential he is. And it's that philosophy that actually drives a lot of Russian expansionist philosophy. They think because they are descendant from these ancient Hyperboreans on this lost continent of the Arctic belongs to them. Now, unbeknownst to many people, we've all heard about the invasion of Crimea and the invasion of Ukraine, but Russia's been building up a vast armed forces along the northern coast. They've reopened old Soviet-era stations, all in an attempt to basically assert their dominance. They've sent submarines down underneath the Arctic ice cap and put titanium flags of Russia in there, basically staking out territory. So it's going to be a big powder keg. So my question is, again, in this sort of world scenario, what if someone found that continent? What might happen? And that becomes the big thrust of the story. And what happens at the end is, Barbara, will you fill in? No.
Notice how quiet I'm being. I'm not going to open my mouth. I do have a question, though, that relates to this, and I've thought about it. The Chinese claim that the Han Chinese are kind of, the authentic Chinese. Are the Rus a race like the Han Chinese? Because Russia is such a polyglot, I mean, it's enormous, and it has all manner of different cultures.
They
And
do, but I mean, they do have a very ultra-nationalistic philosophy that drives them. They do believe they are their own race.
yeah, but not all of them. I guess my question is, do you have to be one of the
mean,
Rus rather than, let's say a Cossack or, somebody from Uzbekistan?
I don't know. I mean,
I've sort of had, I've run across that thought that, the pure Russian, the Rus, just like the Han Chinese are, they think they are. It was a bit like the Nazis, with their
they have
Aryan thing.
very much a philosophy. That's what I'm saying. That the ultranationalist philosophy is that there is a pure Russian, and it's whether you want to consider them Aryan-like, but they do have this sort of belief that they are a superior race. It's not just this polyglot community. They think they are the superior race. In this book, you're going to find out that one of their reasons for their nationalistic pursuit of expansion ties to the Russian Orthodox Church. They have a theory called the Third Rome theory, that they believe that there's been basically two Romes prior to this. First it was Constantinople, then there was Rome, and next it's going to be in the next third Rome is going to be in Russia. I'm going to tell you way too much, so no, never mind.
So in the front, before you start the book, Jim does have some information for you, and one of them is he talks about a thing called UNCLOS, UNCLOS, right?
Yes.
So want to explain that, because you've already touched on the idea that Russia is planting flags and wanting to expand territory in the Arctic, but will this treaty
There's
help?
8 countries that circle the Arctic, and we basically by territorial agreement, they all agree that we only own up to X number, basically 200 kilometers past what's considered to be their coastline is considered their property. Anything beyond that is no man's land. But now Russia wants to keep pushing that boundary further and further out, and hopefully their goal is to encompass all of the Arctic. They already claimed all the way out to Greenland as being part of their territory.
Right. And that makes sense with climate warming, because, for a long time you couldn't go there. So, it was frozen, and now it's becoming a naval asset. It's becoming a road, an alternate to shipping lane, a tremendously more efficient shipping lane.
So a way of getting access to the vast treasure house that is the Arctic.
Right.
Oil, gas.
So in 2017, my husband and I signed up for, we like to do these sort of first things, but anyway, we signed up for the first commercial sailing across the Northwest Passage. We went from Seward, Alaska, we went north, we went up past Nome and the Barents Sea, around the top of Alaska, down by the I'm trying to remember what they're called, the Flaming or Smoky Cliffs or something, across the top of Canada to Greenland and all. And the cruise ship line hired an icebreaker, a British-run icebreaker, bright red, to go with us. The idea being that, we would push all the ice out of the way and we would be safe. There was no ice. The icebreaker, those guys were just having a vacation. They were out sunning. There were 2 polar bears that anybody ever saw. And, it was really, I was glad they were over-prepared. Because, that was a good thing. But it was really a shock. And when we went to the little villages along that part of Canada, wherever you went, they had like satellite dishes on their homes, and they can't really use their snowmobiles that much because there isn't enough of it. Some of the, the fishing, their whole way of life was really changing, and that was in 2017. So I don't know what it would be like now, but it's kind of it's like a regular cruise thing that you can do now, in the same way that you can now circumnavigate Greenland, which was not possible at all. So
that's one of the reasons why Russia has been, stocking up on that northern coast, is because there's a new trade route opening up. There's the Northwest Passage, but also the Northeast Passage that connects from the Pacific to the Atlantic across northern Europe and across northern Russia. And so they were again staking off their interest there.
So what all have they found in terms of, I have a theory, but I'm going to lay the groundwork here. What have they found in terms of mineral, maybe coal and other stuff way up north? There's been quite a lot of it, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, huge. Again, I don't have the statistics in front of me, though it's stated in the book about the vast mineral wealth that's untapped in the Arctic.
And there's vast coal in Siberia. So my theory about Hyperborea is that it isn't that it was a lost continent. It's just that it was there and it's gotten iced over. But at one point in the world, when world was a lot warmer, as we are going in that direction, indeed, people could live at that altitude. Way up there.
There is a continent up there. Just read the book.
So much for science. Yes, ma'am?
Very scientific.
Well, there are various ones. The one we did was Crystal, which then went bankrupt during the pandemic and is not. But there are a number of cruise lines that go on the Northwest Passage cruise, and there are a number of them now that go around Greenland. You can circumnavigate Iceland. We went, I'm trying to remember, it was like 2005. We went to Katortak, which took me a while to learn how to pronounce, in Greenland. And that was the only place that you could, if you were traveling by sea, that you could land in Greenland if you weren't on some expedition. But now, they have flights from Iceland to Greenland. It's amazing. So I know I'm spoiling your general theory here that there was Hyperborea, but I really do think at one point that it was possible to live up there.
Oh, no doubt. There is evidence of a civilization that was existing to the north. They found petroglyphs and tools, and so some of that's raised in this book, and it's actually factual. I'm not making that up. There's
really a lot to learn in this book, including a new language that I never heard of, but we will get to that. So tell us what happened. We're in Washington. No, where are we first? We're not in Washington first.
Well, Gray and Company are in Washington when we start because they're dealing with the aftermath of what happened at the end of the last book. There's an attack on Sigma. I'm not going to say exactly what happens, and the aftermath. Again, if you haven't read the one, you can just jump in here. I'm going to explain what happens in the last book, so you don't have to read the last book. But again, how many people submitted names for Tucker's new pup? I got 4,000 submissions, because at the end of the book, where Kingdom of Bones, where Tucker, for those that don't know, Tucker is it's an Army Ranger. He was a dog handler. He had a military war dog named Kane, and also as Kane's brother Abel. Abel died in Afghanistan. Tucker eventually fled with his dog Kane. At the end of Kingdom of Bones, he's sort of foisted upon with a pup that was rejected by the Lackland Air Force Base that trains dogs. Says this thing's useless, and Tucker says, nope, no dog's useless. I will train this dog. So I was going to name the dog at the end of that book, but I don't know what to name him. So at the end of the book, I just said, "Hey, you all, pass on some names, please." And so over the course of a couple years, from the Kingdom of Bones to this book, 4,000 submissions of names. So the dog's name is Marco, for those that don't know that yet. And Marco came from a gentleman who wasn't a military war dog handler, and his dog was Marco. Marco saved many lives out in the field. Discovered, I think he said, like a dozen IEDs that he dug up. So again, once I learned that, I thought, I can't. I'm going to name a pup. I'm going to honor Marco. So that's where Marco got his name from.
So if you look in your book at the doodle, you will see that there is not just Kane, but there's also Marco. There's the puppy.
2 dogs.
It's a 2-headed doodle this time. It's really nice, which is one reason it took Jim all day to sign all those books.
Took a while.
Yeah, he's really
Double
an
doodles.
You're really an Iron Man with the.
A boy, 2 boys. Yeah, Kane and Marco.
I'm really glad you brought them back because I absolutely love the book in which you introduced them.
They're fun characters to write. For those that don't know, Tucker, I encountered this sort of dynamic duo of the military working dog and the handler when I went on a USO tour to Iraq and Kuwait during the winter of 2010, just the tail end of the Gulf War, and we were sort of sent there as a part of a USO tour to go out there and talk to the gentleman out there, and they were like, "Get out of the way, there's cheerleaders coming." But no, I'm going to sign your book. But me being a former veterinarian, I saw guys working with their dogs out there, and I thought, I'm going to speak to these guys, and I'm curious about their relationship. And can I pet your dog? If you want to lose your hand, you can try. So I was curious about that relationship. Did they just consider their dogs to be like a weapon, a sidearm, or what was this relationship like? And I found how deep of a bond and relationship these handlers have with their dogs. They have a phrase that they repeat a lot. So it runs down the lead, which means over time, the handler and the dog begin to sense each other so well, they don't need to communicate verbally or via hand signal. They just sort of know what the other wants or needs. And so their emotions and their senses sort of travel up and down that leash. So it runs down the lead. I thought, well, that's really cool. I want to try to create these characters on paper. So initially, I wrote some short stories with the characters, but I was always writing only from one side of the lead. I was only writing from the point of view of Tucker. But I thought, well, that's not fair. So this is a dynamic duo. So I want to write scenes from the other side of the leash. And I want to write from the point of view of the dog. What does the dog think about this situation? What does the dog think about his handler? And I went to Lackland Air Force Base. I learned about the training. I talked to different handlers, tried to make it as authentic as I can. And I didn't want the dog to break out in song halfway through and be a Disney version of the military war dog. So the weird thing is that Tucker and Kane appeared in various books over the years, and including solo adventures. And when they first appeared in Bloodline, I tried to be as authentic as I could, and I got a lot of feedback from the general public saying, "Oh, this Kane is like Rin Tin Tin or Lassie. There's no way those dogs could do that. That's you're making them like a superhero." And so that was what I was hearing from the public. What I was hearing from the handlers who read the book and were vetting it, well, Jim, that you did a good job, but you're really pulling the reins back on what these dogs could do. That's only like they could do much more than what you're depicting in this book. So as each book came on, I tried to be even more authentic with what their true capabilities are. So I enjoy writing them.
So we're going to have Marco learning to be as terrific as Kane.
Of course.
Of course.
He's a little rough around the edges. He's got a little Kowalski, energy with him. Of course, it ends up that Kowalski works with him, which Kowalski and Marco working together, it's not a good combination.
Right. So Tucker is not officially a part of Sigma, right? Isn't he more like a contract or? Yeah,
he's never been. They tried to recruit him at one point, but he said no. He's sort of lone wolf because he's sort of burnt out on this whole military aspect of life. He wanted to go out in the field with him and his dog, but he gets recruited for. Sometimes he stumbles into problems. Other times, the problems he's called to action. And this time he's called to action because they have to rescue somebody, and his expertise in the field with his dog was extraction. So he's sent in to help search and extract a valuable asset.
I love having them back in the book because I missed them after. Because
Me too.
Yep. So well, now you aren't because they're here, right?
Exactly.
All right. So we have what happens in Russia. To kind of how much of that do you want to describe? Because it's way up in the front of the book.
So again, at the beginning, we find the death of an archivist. He manages to sort of set off a coded message about what he's discovered. That coded message happens to reach Sigma Force. Again, it's a long reason why it ends up at Sigma Force, but read the book, you'll find out. So it reaches Sigma Force, and now they're trying to figure out who killed him. In the course of again, or at the beginning, I don't want to ruin that either. They find out who kills him. If you've read my books before, you've seen her before. So it's a return of a recurrent sort of nasty person. So.
I don't know that nasty is fair. Lethal would be fair. I don't know that nasty. That's
No,
not strong enough.
Yeah, she took over an organization, a terrorist organization. She's been pretty brutal with Sigma, and the one who did the damage that I'm talking about to Sigma headquarters was the same woman. So,
Right. So the question would be then, why is she involved in the game, and what is it that the hidden or the lost library might reveal that would help Russia in its ambitions to take over more of the Arctic?
that's the other thing I wanted to figure out too when I was writing this book. Besides finding out if there truly could be a lost continent in the Arctic, yes, there can. Yeah, is where is that library? They've been searching it for centuries. They found little tidbits. They found caches of books similar to what you see in the beginning of this story. Moscow was riddled with tunnels. There's sort of a whole underground world beneath Moscow. It basically was started out as a means of protection for the aristocracy, for the Tsars. Eventually, because the Russian Orthodox Church was closely associated with, in cahoots with the Tsars, they began tunneling between all their cathedrals and the Kremlin. So the whole underground underneath Moscow is riddled with tunnels. That's what they believe is where the library vanished. But they've been scoured and no one's ever found it. So I did some more research trying to figure out where could it possibly be, and I think I know. I really think I know where it's hidden.
What was the
It's in there.
motivation that
Yep.
you are guessing for hiding it in the first place? Why is it that Ivan, concealed his library?
So Ivan the Great found it. Ivan the Terrible, his grandson, thought it was this, and again, this is true. He thought it contained the secret to Russia's becoming a dominant global power. And he thought that there were actually black arts buried in these books, and he hired a bunch of translators to try to find out what black arts are hidden in these books. They became even the translators became convinced that there's something here that we should not be learning about, and they fled. So, of course, that to me is very intriguing. What was in those books that could potentially lead to the rise of the Russian Empire that becomes a global power? And
So early on, again, not a spoiler, there's a Russian expedition that goes to Svalbard, which is an archipelago.
this is in the prologue.
Right, this is in the prologue. I'm being really careful. No Yellowstone moment here. Norway, for those of you who've actually looked, Norway not only goes north, but it curves around the top of Sweden and Finland. You can get to Norway directly from Russia without having to go through either Finland or Sweden. I mean, I've always, until recently, not paying attention, kind of thought that Sweden went all the way up and then Finland went all the way up, but that's not true. Anyway, the Russians sent an expedition to Svalbard for reasons that Jim will recount. But what I think is so funny
That's
is
historical. I mean, they actually
Right.
what I write in the prologue is about an expedition that's sent out to the north to basically find that northeast passage. Everybody's been searching for that northeast passage, that secret route across top of Russia to get to the Pacific. And Catherine the Great, who basically usurped Peter, the emperor at that point, who was, again, the son of Ivan the Terrible, who lost his library. And this is true. She sent out the secret expedition led by one of her major naval officers, supposedly to go find that Northeast Passage, but new documents that have turned up from her son, that was not what this actually. She sent them to find that lost continent. She was also convinced. So again, why did Catherine the Great think that continent existed? Did she know something from that library? So that
No, now here's the interesting part for those of you. I can recommend a really phenomenal biography by Robert Massey about Catherine the Great. It reads like a thriller. I mean, it's just wonderful. She's not Russian. She was a German princess. Actually, she was not even a princess. I think she was, trying to remember, she was some kind of minor German aristocracy that somehow or other got married into Russia. And she became, as often is the case, people who marry into things became more Russian than the Russians. But she was, and so, when you mention all that, I couldn't help but think, having read about her, why was it that she was the person who was, so busy looking for, so not busy, but
she was
driven.
preoccupied. Yeah, she was driven to try to find that lost continent.
Right.
So the question is, why? What was the impetus to do that? So to me, it suggests that she had secret knowledge that no one else
But what
knew.
I'm saying is, I think it's interesting that she wanted to show Russia as more than Russia
Oh, yeah. I
perhaps
mean, her
was,
goal
and
was
yet she
to-
wasn't Russian,
she-
which I think is, kind of an interesting.
She wanted to bring Russia into basically Russia was considered to be sort of a secondary country. It was sort of, she wanted to show that Russia could be as equal to the European countries.
Hi, Scoop. Did you decide to relocate? Hi. Are you going to look at Mom? You don't look a lot like Marco, do you? No, you're too little. You want to walk around? Yep. Right. So one of the many discoveries in this book, and it's not going to spoil anything. Tell us about this language, because I really thought that I knew a fair amount about linguistics, but this is a language I've never heard of.
I don't know if I want to say that, because that is sort of this book is sort of a bit of a puzzle box, and I'm afraid that if I tell you what that language is, it's going to ruin a part of the puzzle. But there's a language there that is actually is real. It's a big girl. Very cute.
So what do you want to talk about?
I would just say, what do you guys, what,
for questions.
yeah.
Okay.
I'm afraid if I go any more, it's just going to ruin things. I'm just like, I think we've told you too much. Forget everything we told you.
Yep. Sorry, just a moment. You're going to have to repeat the questions because I can't get up and hand you the mic.
I will.
now.
I will.
If you have Marco teamed up with Kowalski, are there going to be big explosions as one finds the bomb and one sets the bomb?
The question with Kowalski and Marco teamed together, there's bound to be explosives, and yes, there are. They're fun to write. Yes.
Lisa, Peter's wife, has been having a hiatus for the last several books. Are we going to get her back at some point?
Yes, we are. Quit ruining things I'm trying to write. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to have every single character, so sometimes I have to rotate them out of, you go to the side for a little bit. So yes, she's in the next book. Yes.
When you're writing a Sigma story and then you're writing another story, how do you keep them separated in your mind?
They're not. I have to. I write basically. I've been doing 2 books a year for most of my life. It's usually been a Sigma story and then something else. And I've tried different type of things just to play with different genres and play with different styles of writing. But I've got to, immerse myself in one story. I've tried actually flipping between. I'll do one chapter here today and another chapter here. It's like basically, breaking the gears in my head trying to do that. I've got to work, sequentially. It's just the way. And some authors don't. Some authors will say, I can write, chapter 40, then I write chapter 4, then I go chapter 88. There's something wrong with their heads.
So basically you start from the beginning and work on one particular book until you're pretty much done with it and then start on the other one?
So the question is, do I, start with one book, write it, complete it, start the next one? There's a little bit of overlap, and the overlap is the research. To get 2 books a year, I will research another novel while I'm writing actively the other novel, so that when I'm done that novel, my research is done, so I'm ready to begin that novel without a large break between the two.
That makes sense.
Thank
So
you.
Now I can, without having a Yellowstone moment, tell you that Jim is writing, as you may know, a science fiction fantasy series called Moonfall. And we can confirm that he will launch it here. And I'm trying to remember which Monday in February. I think it is around the 16th. If one of you wants to look at the February calendar, it's that Monday. But anyway, it'll be the 3rd book in the Moonfall series, right?
It's
So
title
her
is
question may pertain to, are you writing Sigma Force and then writing the Moonfall
I am.
series, and how does that work?
barriers between them. Big, strong walls.
Yep. And also, there's a period when you turn in the manuscript where you're waiting for them to send it back to you with editorial letters, and then you have to also do proof the pages at some point. They send you those. So
My writing's perfect. The editor goes, "Oh, Jim, you're great." No, it's not true.
while all that's going on, there's a hiatus and an opportunity to write something else. But publishing is a slow process. It seems because they want to lead longer with promotion. In many respects, it seems to be taking longer to get a book to print.
It takes about a year. By the time I turn in the manuscript, it's about a year before you guys see it.
Right.
So, like, I finished A Dragon in Black Glass, a 3rd fantasy book, last January, February, that was put to bed. So it takes a year before it actually.
So when
the light of
the
day.
Sigma books come out, they don't come out regularly, like for a while there. They were coming out in December. I remember that, but then they kind of
They
move
play
around
with
a
the
bit.
schedule. Sometimes they think certain, we think Jim's a, summer blockbuster book. And then, oh no, he's more of a Christmas surprise.
It's nicer for you to come to Scottsdale in December, I have to admit, but still.
Me
Right.
too.
Okay, next question. Anybody have one?
Let's go back here first. Yes.
So the last continent, is it any relation, or maybe you'll draw the relation to it, to the lost empire of Tartaria? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. No, it's not. I'm going a different direction with this.
Could you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. The question basically is she's bringing up another theory about a lost continent, lost civilization, and she's wondering if what I'm bringing up in the book is that, and it's not. Somebody else had a question back there too. Yes. Always. I mean, I'm always looking for. Basically, I'm looking for 3 things in my idea box. It's that science that makes me go, "What if?" What threat might arise from that. I'm also looking for a location, something that's going to be intriguing, or history that ends in a question mark, something I can solve within the pages of the novel. So I'm always looking for cool locations to set stories. So a lot of times I travel. I don't. I've mentioned this before. I don't travel a lot for research. I don't say, well, I'm going to write a book in Paris. I'm going to fly to Paris, run around Paris, come back and write. I usually travel, and then while I'm traveling, I find something interesting about that place. And I always use this example. I was in northern Spain, in a little village in Galicia, and there was a woman selling flowers on the corner. And I love walking up to somebody that's local, who seems to maybe know about the town. She looked like, from the amount of her wrinkles on her face, like, about this town. I love to walk up to people and say, tell me something that no one knows about your village. Now, I don't know why that works. I don't know if it's just the fact that they don't know who I am and they want to gossip, and they've got an easy victim. And she goes, "Oh, I will tell you." And she goes, "Follow me." So she closes up her little shop and she's walking down this alley. I think she's gonna mug me. James Rollins killed by an octogenarian. And she goes to this door, and it's like a wooden door. It's clearly, everything is old in Spain. And but there's a branded symbol in the door. She goes, you know what that symbol means? I go, I have not a clue. She goes, it's the crucibellum. It's a symbol of the crucibellum. And I go, I still don't know what you mean. She goes, it's a symbol of witch hunters, that many people think the Spanish Inquisition ended. In northern Spain, it has not ended. There is supposedly a group of people still hunting witches in northern Spain, and that's the symbol of the witch hunters. So that became my book, The Crucible. Again, I would have never, just from doing research, ever found that. But if I hadn't stumbled upon that and asked that question, that book would never happened. So,
But nevertheless, you do a lot of traveling.
I do, but mostly for fun. I mean, I just go for the. Like I said, I'm always looking for that location. I'm looking for cool ideas. You know, Steve Barry, my enemy, is my friend. We were in Europe together, and we were like in this cathedral, and we're both, you know, basically looking around the cathedral. He's going this way, and I'm going this way, and I noticed that there's like a grate in the floor. What's that? You know, it's. You know, could somebody sneak in there? If somebody just like, can you put a bomb in there? And can I sneak over there? And then I circle around and I meet Steve Barry on the other side. And he goes, you know what? There's this like grate over here. I bet you somebody could sneak in there and put a bomb in there. So we're always thinking about things like that. So
Anyone else?
here.
So I've wondered for a long time, and then you announced that they bought the rights to make a TV series or a movie of your book.
Right.
If you could cast anybody as a couple of your main characters, I don't care which, who would you pick? If you could just pick them out of your choice.
Who is the priciest guy out there? I like to play that game, but I like to get everybody else's input. And the reason why is I know who Gray is in my head. You know, I've written 18 books with Gray and with Kowalski and with Painter and with everybody else, Monk, Cat. I know exactly what they look like in my head. I'm afraid if I play too diligent with that game, that I'm going to start thinking of that character. Use an example. Harry Potter. I read Harry Potter, of course, before the movies came out, and I knew what Harry Potter looked like. Now he's Daniel Radcliffe. I cannot think of Harry Potter without picturing Daniel Radcliffe. And I'm afraid that that's going to, you know, if I start thinking about, oh, that character would be great for Gray, then I'm going to think all of a sudden Gray's going to start becoming that person. So for those that don't know, we just signed a deal with Amazon to do a streaming series based on Sigma. They bought the whole universe. I can now talk about it. Leonardo DiCaprio's production company, Appian Way, is overseeing the doing the investigation to see if they can get it greenlit. So, you know, knock on wood, we may see that happen. But then I'm stuck, because you know what's going to happen? Daniel Radcliffe is going to be playing Gray. Then I'm going to think, oh, you know, now Gray is Harry Potter.
Lucy Liu as Seishan might be interesting.
I always picture sort of Lucy Liu as Seishan, to be honest with you. But
Anybody else?
yes.
In relation to Arkangel, why is the title Arkangel?
It's cool. No, there actually is a town called Arkangel. It's a real Russian town on the northern coast. I thought the name was cool, and I liked just the way it looked on the page. And also ties to the fact that they believe that why the city got its name is they believe that the Archangel Michael protects that town, and that somewhat plays with the story too. Is that mythology?
Sure. If you picture that curve over the top of Scandinavia that I mentioned earlier, where you see up and you dip down, you will come to Murmansk, which was a World War II Russian military. It was a naval installation. I was there in 2012. And it was 98 degrees in Murmansk. They were completely unprepared for it. I thought we were all going to pass out. And I was very touched by the fact that there were cemeteries for Americans and for other, because we were allies with in the war. There was a French cemetery, there was a British cemetery, there was an American cemetery and all, but it was a very stark kind of a town. I mean, it was really unattractive, and they were unprepared for summer. And then we went on to Arkangel, our Archangelos, and it's in a bay. There's when you come around down this way, eventually there's a big bay that dips down, and Archangelos is down here. So it's south of Murmansk, but because it had to go, the ships would have had to go north in order to get out. It wasn't really used all that much. But now with all this global warming, Arkangel, or it's in the oblast is the Russian term for a province, and so it's in the Arkangel Oblast, I think. It may become a really serious city and military headquarters, because now ships can sail out of it both directions. Now they can go.
It's a huge military spot now.
Right. Years ago, Robert Harris wrote a book. I think, I'm trying to remember if it was set in Murmansk. It was a World War II story. Whether it was set in Murmansk or Arkangel, I can't remember what. But anyway. But it was, I mean, it's a long time ago. It was like 25 years ago before we even started seriously thinking about. You know that St. Petersburg was built because Russia wanted to have a warm water port, and the only one they had was Odessa in the Crimea at that time. And the Turks had sewn up the Dardanelles. I wrote a master's thesis at Stanford about this, which is why I happen to know it. And the Turks held up the Russians for ransom every time they wanted to sail a ship out of the Black Sea and through the Dardanelles. So Peter the Great said, no, and decided that he could create a port on the Baltic. And that's why he went up there and built St. Petersburg and tried to make it a wall to the west. But nobody even thought about at the time that they could make Arkangel or Murmansk a port. Sorry, I actually do know this, and I actually have been there.
Yeah, I mean Archangel-esque. There's a SK at the end of it. Actually,
There
they're
is,
being
yeah.
specific. It's been a port for all the way back to the time of Catherine the Great. They were operating.
But not a year-round warm water port.
No, not year round.
Yeah, so that was the problem. Patrick, you're lurking over there. You must have questions from the audience.
I am lurking. Yes, we have some questions about. Tell us about your dog or dogs currently.
So they're asking about my dogs. So I have two. Echo, it's a 12-year-old golden. If you go follow me on Facebook, you'll see way too many pictures of her. Then new rescue Charlie. He was impulse buy. Gonna get dog food, and there was one of those, no-kill shelter, pet adoption thing. Is like, oh gosh, you're coming home with me. So they're good kids, mostly. Sue, do you have a question before we continue on? So I cut you off there.
Moonfall series coming out.
February. Yep.
Okay.
Let's see. Another question is: have you been to Russia and/or China? How many times and for how long?
I've been to St. Petersburg many times. My brother actually worked at the Commerce Department in St. Petersburg for 3 years. Stories he could tell. So a lot of the details, like the botanical park that's featured in the novel, I've been in that park. I've been through the arboretum that's in that park. I've been through the details that I got there was from actually walking through that park. The fact that you go through the Japanese section and the smell of cherry blossoms is just overwhelming when you get through there, which is blind Kane to when he's on a scent signal. But I don't think I'm going to ruin anything by saying that. China, I've been 3 weeks in China, a week in Beijing, a week in Shanghai, and a week in Hong Kong. But just the one time.
Wow. Let's see here. When it comes to research, how much is there a place where you say, all right, I've done as much research as I need to do? Or are you always...
I mean, it's easy for me. The question is, when do I know it's okay to stop researching? Part of me says never, but if I did that, you would never have any books. 'Cause I would just continue to research and think I'm working, and I'm not. I ran into that problem when I was writing Sandstorm. It was just fascinating. The country of Monsters very fascinating. The more I was learning about it, I was just fascinated by it. The history, the people, both in the past and the present. And I realized, I'm not actually writing anything. So I made sort of a commitment to myself that I could do all my front-loading big research for 90 days. On the 91st day, I have to begin writing that book. That doesn't mean I'm done researching, because every single page requires, checking every little detail. Because if you get it wrong, someone's going to tell you. But if you get it right, it's a little trick for authors. It's called a telling detail. If I know where, and I mentioned this before in this group, if I know where Starbucks is in Kathmandu, and I say, hey, Grays needs a caffeine fix, and he went to this street and that street to go to Starbucks, and somebody that's been to Kathmandu goes, oh my God, there really is a Starbucks there. They'll believe anything after that. You know,
There's a pretty good
telepathic
likelihood that
marsupial
there will be.
creatures that live underneath Antarctica. Sure, because he knew where Starbucks was. So if you get enough of those telling details correct, it's not only is it you don't get dinged from that 1-star Amazon review. He didn't know where the correct Starbucks was. It also helps convince you that I know what I'm talking about when usually I don't.
There was a question about your fantasy novels
Sure.
under the James Clemens pseudonym. Were you all aware of those books? Yeah.
A couple
everybody
nods.
knows. Okay.
My secret alternate identity from a while ago.
And there were kind of 2 different series that you wrote, right?
Yeah, when I first was looking to get published, and I'm going to give you a abbreviate. I give you the long version of it that tells you how absolutely horrible it was of a writer I am. So I'm going to skip that part. But I wrote a thriller, Subterranean. I thought it was science fiction because, again, it had telepathic marsupial creatures that live underneath Antarctica. My editor said, no, it's not science fiction. You said it in modern times, therefore it's a thriller. So whatever, you're buying it. You do what you want. But I got rejected soundly for that first book, Subterranean. It got rejected by 49 different agents. It took until the 50th agent for somebody to see any type of glimmer of hope in that book. Not all the rejections were kind. I mentioned this before. I got one rejection. Usually they're form rejection letters. Dear sir, ma'am, we hate your book. Don't submit to us again, editor. But sometimes they will write in the back a little note to you, Jim, we like that one character. Too bad all the rest of your books suck. But trust me, you can live for a while on the I like that one character. So one editor had written me a handwritten note on the back. It basically was just, 3 words. This is unpublishable. I thought, well, that's kind of him to reject me, but take the extra special effort to write down and kick me in the nuts besides. But I thought it took a while to get that many rejections. So, but during that time, I thought, well, I'm not a science fiction or thriller writer. So I'm going to write another genre I like to write, which is I would love to read, which is fantasy. So I began working on a fantasy novel. Got about halfway through that, and I submitted it to a contest. It was the Maui Writers Conference. It was my very first writers conference. If you're going to go to a writers conference, go to the Maui Writers Conference. And I had submitted the first few chapters of that book to the contest, and I went through summer and got rejection after rejection after rejection. Then a glimmer of hope. Just before I go on that conference, I get a call from an agent. 6 o'clock in the morning, because they don't seem to realize that the West Coast is 3 hours difference. 3 o'clock in true. So the phone rings and it's 6, I'm thinking it's like, oh great, it's an emergency call. I'm going to have to go to the clinic. So she goes, oh, I'm so and so from so and so agency, and I want to represent your book. I thought, who's calling me and fooling? I'm not falling for this. But she eventually convinced me, and so she said, I think I can sell it. I thought, more power to you, lady. It doesn't cost me anything, but I know this is unpublishable. So she goes, what are you working on now, Jim? I need a workhorse. Surely you've got another book in the queue. And I go, I do. I'm just about done writing this fantasy novel. And she goes, I still remember that. That was a noise she made. It haunts me to this day. I don't like fantasy. I don't read fantasy. I don't know any of the fantasy editors. I don't know any of the fantasy publishers. Stop writing that crap. Give me another thriller like Subterranean. I thought, well, I could be honest with her or not. So I decided to say, oh, of course, I will do that. I will stop writing this fantasy novel and will work on a new book. That was an outright lie. I had no intention of not finishing the fantasy novel because, again, that story she thinks she's going to sell, this is unpublishable. I thought, I'm going to give myself the rest of summer. I'm going to try to finish this fantasy novel. I went to the My Writers Conference at the end of summer, and now I'm going there lauding it over everybody. I've got an agent. she's now by this point collected many rejections also, proving my point that this is unpublishable indeed. And the first day of the conference is a meet and greet tea where the attendees can commingle with the teachers and authors and editors and agents that are that have been invited to the conference. It's a big conference. So there's like 600 people gathered in this ballroom in Maui at the end of summer. That's an important clue. Maui, end of summer. Keep that in mind. They required gentlemen to wear jackets. You could wear a Hawaiian shirt, but you had to wear a jacket because it's a literary event. If you have like little patches on your, right here, extra points. So I do not know. To me, a cocktail party is one of the 9 circles of hell. I do not know how to function in that environment. This is my first time at a literary conference. I don't know what the protocol is. I don't know, can you talk to people? Do you have to look them? Can you not look them in the eye? So I'm wandering around this ballroom getting sweatier and sweatier. Because, I don't know, how do you break into it? I swear, as soon as the doors open, everybody closes into a little circle talking amongst themselves. Probably about me. And how do you break into that circle? You just like sidle up to a group and go, I like dogs. And just hope for the best. So by this point, I'm literally sweating now through my jacket almost at this point. And I look across the room and I see somebody I recognize, somebody from my hometown, Sacramento. It's a friend of a friend, not somebody I know well enough, but trust me, a friend of a friend, you are now my best buddy for the rest of my life. We are going to be bonded at the hip for the rest of this conference. So I rush up to him, I grab him on the shoulder, give him a little shake. What are you doing here? He turns around, and it's not my friend. It's Ron Howard. Ron Howard, if he takes his hat off, he's a little bald like me. So he looked a little bit like my friend from Sacramento. No. He goes, well, sir, I was invited. Just checking. Make sure you weren't crashing this party, sir. So I feel embarrassed. I got slinking away, tail between my legs, even more nervous, ready to give up, and look across the room, and I recognize somebody. This time I circled him. Checked his name tag, make sure it's not Ron Howard in disguise. And it's Terry Brooks. Terry Brooks is the international best-selling author of the Shannara series. He pronounces it different. He's wrong. It's Shannara. And I go, Mr. Brooks, just it's an honor to meet you. I've read you growing up, and just made my day to be at this conference just to be able to shake your hand. And he looks at my name tag and goes, yeah, buddy, I'm a fan of yours too. I thought, God, I've learned something already at this conference. Terry Brooks is an asshole. He goes, no, I was one of the judges at this year's contest, and you got such a weird last name. I recognize it, and I really liked your fantasy submission. Matter of fact, I invited my editor to come to this conference to meet you in particular. And based upon that personal introduction from Terry Brooks, I ended up being offered a 3-book fantasy deal from Del Rey Books. So, of course, you know who I'm going to call. As soon as I'm back at the hotel room, Pesha, that's my agent's name. Pesha, I think I sold my fantasy books here at the conference. But I don't know anything about contracts. Could you do the contracts for me? She goes, of course. I love fantasy. That 15% genders a lot of love. And she goes, oh, by the way, I currently also have good news for you is that 2 houses are currently bidding in a bidding war for Subterranean. So I flew to Maui, an unpublished author, flew out of that with 2 different genres, 2 different publishers. Both of them hated my real last name. They said, make up some names. So Rollins became the thriller writer. James Clemens became the fantasy writer. So for the first 7 years of my career, I was doing a fantasy and a thriller every year. Eventually, Rollins became a little more popular than Clemens, and demand became a little bit more for this complicated reason why. I got rejected for my 3rd book in the fantasy series, and so I became more of a thriller writer. But I always wanted to come back to writing fantasy. It's always my love. So why we're back at fantasy is that I just wanted to, again, I needed something to write opposite my Sigma thriller, so I'm going to write a fantasy.
So is one of your fantasies to meet Ron Howard again?
I have a problem with directors. I don't know what it is. I'll tell you this. So one other story. It's Comic-Con back several years ago. if you ever go to Comic-Con, you collect a bunch of crap, and then you have to decide what you want to keep and what you don't want to keep. So I had made that decision, and I had my hand of crap. This is my hand of crap. This is my hand of crap. I'm right-handed. And one thing else you're going to find at Comic-Con, it's hard to find a garbage can. What I've learned, though, is that you find garbage cans near where they sell the hot dogs and snacks. So there's a line waiting to get into to order stuff, and I'm looking like for my break to get through that crowd to the garbage can that's behind it with all my crap in my hand. So I find my little break, I shove my hand forward, this person steps forward, and I'm punching him in the stomach. Anybody see Reservoir Dogs? Everybody watch Pulp Fiction? That's who I punched. Is the director of those movies. Yes.
I hope none of these people work for Amazon.
No, hopefully not. So
Excellent. So if nobody else has a question, do you still have any?
now it says, after that long answer, no one's going to ask any
No.
questions. That was my goal.
Wait, one over here.
I didn't discourage you. Dang it. Yes.
I first read your books like Subterranean and those, which are thrillers. After I read them, I thought, this is science fiction because I'm not a science fiction
thank you.
person. But I loved them. The creativity. Anyway, and then I got
Thanks,
into
Mom.
Sigma Force.
You are a good boy.
That's very kind of you. Thank you much. And even Sigma Force has a very sort of a little bit of a sci-fi element to it. I try to make it as factual and grounded as I can.
Are you ever going to go back to writing those kind of thrillers / science fiction? Or not?
Yes, I've just about finished my next standalone thriller. So that will be coming out next year too.
That's what they're called, right? Standalone.
Yep.
That's distinguished from a series, right? What's the matter, baby? I'm not going to pick you up again because I have to get up
How
again.
about
in
Jake
order to do that.
Ransom, Jim? We always get a couple of questions about him.
Everybody asked about Jake Ransom. So Jake Ransom, again, one of the things I did originally was on the alternate book for the year was to do a middle school book. I like the idea of again creating a character that's just a smart kid. He doesn't have any. It's not like Harry Potter. He has no magical powers. Just a really smart kid. So I pitched a 5-book series. They bought the first 2. I said, and I'm writing other. I can only do 1 book a year. I can't. As long as you're okay with 1 book a year, we're good. So I wrote book 1, book 2. Then they were like, well, are you ready for book 3? She said, can you do them every 6 months? No. So I talked with the editor and basically decided to just write the entire series. I've written the 3rd book, Jake Ransom, The Cauldron of Doom. And then I'll work on book, in my cracks of time, write book 4 and 5. Then what they're going to do, they'll relaunch the series where they'll release them every 6 months.
Can we go back to the prologue for just a minute? Because there was one other thing I wanted to ask you about. One of the reasons there were people in Svalbard in these kind of little camps and all was they were whalers, right? So talk to us a little bit about bowhead whales for reasons not to be disclosed currently. What, you're not going to talk about bowhead whales?
No, it's going to ruin things.
Why are they there? I mean,
I'm
you
not
could.
gonna
You
tell you
could.
why.
You're not going to do it. Oh,
Nope.
I guess my time here is done. Yes. You had a question?
Yeah, Jim, did you see the report from, I think it was New Zealand about let's see if I get the spade-toothed whale? They've only, it's washed up on shore, but they've only seen it dead, they've never seen it alive.
Which one?
Spade.
I don't think I read about that. It sounds like another story.
Well, you'd love going to New Zealand.
I'm trying to show you one of the pictures. That is a picture of bowhead whale. And you notice it's this deep into the book. So no.
It was right in the front. Come on. No, actually, one of the great things about this book, and there are so many great things, is that it has some wonderful pictures and maps. And the cover, when you're done with the book, you can actually figure out what some of the things on the book cover are all about, right?
Sure.
Yep. It is a puzzle box. I think this may be one of your most complex in lots of ways plots. And there's so many things to learn. Whales, language, whatever, libraries and all. So I always like reading Jim's books because I learn a lot. I learn things that would never, ever come my way in the ordinary course of, of life. And because he's he's a scientist and he's such a good researcher, I believe him. You can fact check some of it with your phone. Have any of you started reading thrillers with your phone open so you can look at the territory? Or, I find myself, I never used to do that. But I really love looking at maps, particularly of where last night we had Brad Thor here, and he had an escape route. And so I looked it up, and it is the actual escape route that the guy could take, and the little town is the actual town that is important there. So it's your author trick thing, right? If you get something right, they'll believe everything else.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the book, I have the what's true and what's not section.
Right.
Where I'm going to tell you, how much, where I'm making stuff up, but also some of the stuff that sounds fantastical in the novel. I'm going to say, show you that no, this is real. Why base a story on this was not based on pure fantasy. There's a grounded reason why I chose to take the story in that direction. I added that. If you look at early in my book, those aren't early books. Like Subterranean doesn't have that. Right? Excavation doesn't have that. Deep Fathom doesn't have that. It's only later that I started putting that in there. And basically, it's because I kept getting asked questions. Jim, is this real? Is that real? Over and over and over again. So rather than having to answer email after email after email, I thought I'm just going to put it at the back of the book. That way you will know what's true and what's not. But also because of a 1-star Amazon review. Not that I don't get them occasionally anyways, but this one was like, Jim, I was enjoying your book, and I got to like this part of the book, and it was so outlandish that it just threw me out of the story. I just could not stomach anything after that. 1 star. And I'm thinking the one element he said that was so outlandish was true, but I can't reach through that, computer screen and throttle him and shake him. So now I thought, this is my cure against that. So if you think it's too outlandish, just read the end to see exactly, where I've separated fact from fiction.
And don't read it first, otherwise there will be many spoilers.
No, don't read it first.
But
don't read about the bowhead whales.
I do think this is a book that to really fully understand it, you do have to know the geography. And so, if you haven't actually scoped up the Arctic and especially the Russian border to it, it really does help, I think, to, look it up on your phone, get a map and, sort of figure it out because there's no spoilers there.
There's maps in there, too. You don't have to look it up. I'm going to show you. There's a map at the beginning. There's a map later. I'm going to show you where all those former Soviet-era bases, I'm going to show you where they all are. And there's a lot of them.
But you don't necessarily have the expand feature for those of us who are older with eyes. We could do this on the map, right? All good.
And not in color either.
No. Anyway, thank you very much for coming out this evening.
Wonderful seeing everybody. Thank you. It's
You
wonderful
bet.
seeing familiar faces.
Good job. So thank you, virtual audience, for joining us. And you should have a number in your book, and it would be great if you could line up that way after we move the chairs to the side. So Jim will stay here because you're at photographing height, right? That way you don't have to bounce up and down in order for people to come by you and take your photographs. And do you need pens? You need Sharpies and stuff? Okay. Great. All right. Okay. I know. It looks like you got in the sun. No, I thought that this morning. No, it was this morning. Possibly have gotten sunburned in a block and a half. No.